Hello and welcome to a new episode of Around the World in 7 Days. My name is Neil and I am here with the stories behind the three most important international news events of the week. First of all, we will discuss why our neighbor Sri Lanka is standing on the brink of bankruptcy and what role can India play in this scenario. Then, we will discuss how a recent agreement between Japan and Australia has made geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific region even more interesting. In the end, we will decode how the tag of developing and developed countries are decided and why has there been a controversy on China's status as a developing nation. But first, let's begin with Sri Lankan crisis. Let us assume that someone has 1000 rupees at his disposal and he has to spend 2000 rupees. Then how will that person spend the extra amount? Obviously, he will have to borrow the extra 1000 rupees from some other person. But what will he do if his financial condition is so poor that he is not in a position to repay the loan at the promised time? In such a situation, he will be forced to offer some property to the lender to settle the dues. Such a situation is called bankruptcy. Such a situation is not only faced by people but also by countries. Sri Lanka, the neighboring country of India, is on the verge of bankruptcy. It is facing a financial crisis and it is pleading for assistance from countries like China and India. In this news, we will try to find an answer to the question that what has caused Sri Lanka to reach the verge of bankruptcy. We will also trace the inside story of Sri Lanka's financial crisis, and we will also discuss that how many other countries have been victims of bankruptcy. In addition to all of it, we will engage with the side question of how the US dollar gained the status of de facto global currency. Sri Lanka's debt had started mounting in 2007 when the then Sri Lankan government started borrowing loans for constructing Hambantota port. The government took several loans between 2007 and 2016, and all these loans were borrowed from the Exim Bank of China. However, Sri Lanka's financial crisis is not only limited to the loans borrowed from the Chinese banks. Apart from China, Sri Lanka is also financially overburdened with loans borrowed from Asian Development Bank, International Financial Market, Japan, and India. The major share of Sri Lanka's foreign debt was in form of sovereign bonds, which made 39% of its total foreign debt in 2017. In 2017, BBC had published a report which mentioned that Sri Lanka had a foreign debt of $64 billion at that time. In 2018, Business Times reported that Sri Lanka had to repay $4 billion in foreign debt every year from 2019 to 2022. Sri Lanka's financial condition became so worse that it had to hand over its Hambantota port to China in 2017. Foreign investment in Sri Lanka was also declining, and Sri Lanka had to hand over the Hambantota port to China to boost its foreign reserves. But even the decision of handling the port to China and the resultant slight and momentary boost in foreign reserves did not help in reducing Sri Lanka's debts. The thing is that Sri Lankan government kept on taking foreign loans to improve the country's infrastructure but did not get a significant return from the investment made in the country's infrastructure. As a result, now it is left with no money to repay those hefty loans. In India, there is a Reserve Bank of India, and similarly there is Central Bank of Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka. Central Bank of Sri Lanka has issued a statement in January 2022 and stated that the inflation rate has climbed to 12.1% in December 2021 as compared to 9.5% in November. Then in September 2021, it was in news that there was a shortage of food items in Sri Lanka. There were long queues for essential items like sugar, rice, pulses and milk powder. The cost of 100 grams green chilies was 70 rupees and 1 kg potatoes was selling for 200 rupees. It implies that inflation in Sri Lanka is at its peak. The situation continues to be volatile even now. Milk powders are now available in 100 gram sachets in market so that people can afford it. So the question is that what are the reasons behind such high inflation rate in Sri Lanka? Actually, the country's foreign exchange reserves are running out rapidly. When foreign exchange reserve of a country runs out, then the country cannot import goods from foreign countries. Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves stood at $7.6 billion at the end of 2019. That was sufficient for importing foreign goods for a period of 5 months in 2020. Year 2020 saw Sri Lankan currency reeling under immense pressure. Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves dipped down to $5.7 billion by the end of 2020 and then slipped to $1.6 billion in November 2021. The situation has become so critical that the Sri Lankan banks have urged the citizens to deposit the foreign currency in their position in the banks and to exchange it with Sri Lankan currency. $1.6 billion can only pay the import bill for just 3 weeks. Therefore, Sri Lanka is deeply concerned about its financial condition. A reason behind Sri Lanka's depleting foreign exchange reserves is that its income too has diminished. Sri Lanka's main source of income is tourism. Sri Lanka invested heavily in improving its tourist destinations. But tourism has come to a standstill since the last 2 years now due to COVID. Now let us discuss the meaning of bankruptcy before proceeding any further. When a country fails to pay its creditors on time, it is said to go into default, which is the national equivalent of going bankrupt. Movement towards bankruptcy is also evident in the deterioration in credit ratings. American rating agency Fitch has downgraded Sri Lanka's rating from CCC to CC, and it is the rating granted prior to default rating. However, Sri Lanka is not the first country that has reached the brink of bankruptcy. Previously, Russia became a defaulter when its currency market collapsed in 1998, and as investors started fearing that Russian currency's value would decline. Ecuador, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic became defaulters in 2001, 3, and 2005 respectively. The Latin American country of Argentina has defaulted twice, in 2001 and 2020. While going through the whole matter, a question must have crossed your mind that why does a country need foreign reserves? Actually, a country must have sufficient foreign exchange as it is quite crucial from many perspectives. If a country does not possess foreign exchange, then in that situation it will not be in a position to import goods from the foreign countries. Suppose India has to import oil, then India must possess dollars. Oil producing countries will refuse to provide oil to a country for a longer duration if it does not possess sufficient dollars. Obviously, it will in turn affect the country's economy and the government's revenue will be directly affected by it. The same thing has happened with Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been facing two kinds of crisis since last decade. One is fiscal deficit and other is trade deficit. An example of Sri Lanka's extreme trade deficit is that it is even behind Pakistan, Bangladesh and Nepal in exporting its goods to China, and hence it suffers a major trade deficit with China. Sri Lanka imported goods worth $4 billion from China in 2020 while exported only $28 crore worth of goods in return. Obviously, Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves had to deplete someday, and that day has arrived. Now, did the specific need of US dollars for importing foreign goods strike you as something odd? The fact is that foreign currency that is needed for carrying out import-export is the US dollar because the US dollar is regarded as the global currency at present. Dollar and euro are very popular currencies and they are widely acceptable in the international market. The US dollar accounts for 64% of the foreign exchange reserves held by central banks around the world, and it grants the dollar an international currency status. As per the Geneva-based International Standard Organization's list, there are 185 currencies in the world, but most of them are used domestically, that is, within the countries which print them. On the other hand, 85% of the world's trade is carried out in dollars. International debt transactions are also carried out in dollars. Therefore, foreign banks need dollars for carrying out international trade. Now let us finally discuss what role can India play to help Sri Lanka in its hour of crisis. India has reiterated its neighborhood first policy and has assured Sri Lanka that it will help her by providing financial assistance. India has also agreed to send petroleum products to Sri Lanka. Besides, there is also a currency swap agreement between the two countries which can be used by Sri Lanka to get some breathing space on the foreign reserves front. This is also being seen as an opportunity for India to gain back the foothold in relations with Sri Lanka that it has been losing to China in the last few years. Overall, it needs to be seen when Sri Lanka's financial crisis will finally come to an end and how long will it take for Sri Lanka to stabilize its economy. India's role will be crucial not only from the perspective of Sri Lanka but also from geopolitical perspective in our immediate Indian Ocean neighborhood. Australia, UK and the US agreed on a historic security pact, that is AUKUS, recently. It is aimed at limiting the increasing dominance of China in the Indo-Pacific region. You must have also heard in the news that to limit and counter China's expansionist plans in the Indo-Pacific region, a grouping called Quad has been brought into existence. India, America, Australia and Japan are part of the Quad group. Now, taking a step further, Japan and Australia have come together and signed a defense pact. Both the countries have termed the pact as historic. It is being said that this pact has sent a clear message to China that its actions in the Indo-Pacific will not go uncontested. Keeping this backdrop in mind, we will discuss the importance of the recent agreement inked between Japan and Australia. We will also discuss the geopolitical concept of the Indo-Pacific region. We will look at other updates in the region apart from this recent Australia-Japan pact. First, let us locate and mark the Indo-Pacific region. The geographical definition of Indo-Pacific region varies as per the different countries and administrations. Broadly, it refers to the interconnected regions between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean that are linked together by the Strait of Malacca at the center of Southeast Asia. As far as India is concerned, it recognizes the Indo-Pacific region as the one that extends from the eastern coast of Africa to the western coast of the United States. More than 3 dozen countries are located in this region. Now let us move on to the reasons due to which this region has been consistently in news for quite some time now. Actually, the reasons are many. I already mentioned that 38 countries are located in the Indo-Pacific region, which covers around 44% of the world's land and is home to 65% of the world's population. At present, trade, that is import and export, of 75% of the world's goods take place via this region. All the ports located in this region are among the busiest ports in the world. You will be astonished to know that this region contributes around 60% of the world's GDP. The region remains crucial for energy trade, especially petroleum products, and is seen to be of strategic importance by both oil consumer and oil producer countries. Overall, the region has all the required factors for enabling competition on issues of regional trade and investment opportunities. And hence, there is a cutthroat competition between the world's fastest growing economies which want to safeguard the supplies of resources required to fuel their growth. It means that the matter is not limited to geopolitics only, but geo-economic competition is also playing an important role. The term Indo-Pacific has gained prominence in global geopolitical discourse as both the United States and China seek to expand and consolidate their political, military, and economic dominance in this vast region. Now let us come back to the agreement inked recently between Japan and Australia. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was scheduled to visit Australia recently. However, in view of surge in COVID cases, he had to cancel his tour. Still, the talks on agreement were not shelved, and the Australian PM Scott Morrison and Japanese PM Fumio Kishida signed the defense agreement in a digital conference. This agreement has been called Reciprocal Access Agreement. As per the media reports, both the countries will conduct joint military exercises under the agreement. This agreement will facilitate streamlined arrangements to support quick deployment of defense forces. In addition, stringent rules on the transport and supply of weapons have also been eased. The agreement was being discussed since last 1 year and now it has been signed. It has opened a new chapter of advanced defense cooperation between Japan and Australia. Defense experts are calling the agreement a historic achievement. The reason is that so far Japan has signed such an agreement with America only, and that too in the 1960s. The most crucial thing about the agreement is that both the countries have clearly stated their intention of carrying out joint strategic exercises in the Indo-Pacific region. It is being seen as a response to the increasingly challenging security environment of the Indo-Pacific region. But experts are of the belief that such an exercise of Japan and Australia will irk China, and China will not take these exercises lightly. Now the question is that why China should be troubled by the growing friendship between Japan and Australia. Actually, China has rapidly increased its dominance in the East China Sea and the South China Sea in the recent years. These areas lie in the Indo-Pacific. In this region, there is also a constant dispute between ASEAN countries and China. Then, China has been trying hard for decades to take over Taiwan, which is located in this very region, as it does not consider Taiwan as an independent country. But China is unable to merge Taiwan as Taiwan is backed by a superpower like America. Then China has trapped Sri Lanka in its debt trap and it has seized Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. The port is located in the Indo-Pacific region and it is situated a few miles from the Indian shores. Also, China is providing military equipments such as submarines and warships to Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Thailand. Experts are defining the situation as a new kind of military colonialism. In fact, China's outreach to India's neighbors in the Indian Ocean region has also not been seen in a favorable light by India, given the tension and trust deficit between the two countries. And apart from all this, China is also posing a challenge to American dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. Belt and Road Initiative is China's ambitious project and it includes many Asian, Middle Eastern, African and European countries. Various countries which are influential in the Indo-Pacific region are also part of China's BRI, but neither USA nor India is a part of BRI. On the economic front, China is a member of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or RCEP, the world's largest trade agreement. Various countries of the Indo-Pacific region are also a part of RCEP. China is lobbying to sign another major trade agreement with these countries. But America is not a member of any of these agreements. The issue is that China considers itself as a dominant force in the Indo-Pacific region and China is constantly trying to assert itself in the region. And so, it is being said that China may be worried by the recent developments like the signing of agreement between Japan and Australia, as it is very clearly an attempt to thwart the assertion of Chinese hegemony in the region. However, China's troubles are not only limited to the agreement signed between Japan and Australia. Various other arrangements have been made to limit China's dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. In the very beginning, I mentioned Quad grouping of India, America, Australia and Japan, whose sole purpose, experts argue, is to limit China's dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, it is believed that the agreement signed between Japan and Australia will further strengthen the Quad. Apart from these two, there is an AUKUS agreement which has aligned Australia, UK and the US. The agreement would allow Australia to construct a nuclear submarine for the first time, and the technology for constructing the submarine would be provided by the US and Britain. Overall, the picture emerges that China's attempt to create its hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region is being fiercely contested. In such a situation, the outcome of this evolving geopolitical and geo-economic battle will be closely monitored. And most importantly, it remains to be seen that which countries will benefit and which will suffer losses in this game. Hasn't it crossed your mind why the mighty China, which loans money to countries all over the world and calls itself an economic superpower, is yet considered a developing country? The surprise is compounded by the revelation that At present, China is the second largest economy in the world. This irony has been noticed by many countries, and recently some countries have expressed concern over China's status as a developing nation at the World Trade Organization. They argue that as an upper middle income country, it should not be in the same category as the other developing countries that include poor countries like Papua New Guinea and Zimbabwe. This miscategorization has meant that China avails all kinds of concessions meant for developing countries while it is actually not entitled to them. Today we will try to understand how the status of a country is determined as developed or developing. We will also learn about the benefits given to developing countries. And we will also discuss the grounds on which China's status as a developing nation is being questioned. Actually, WTO has no standardized definition of developing or developed country, nor are there any set standards for countries to claim such a status. It completely depends on the discretion of a country in which category it wants to put itself. As of now, about 2/3 of 164 members of WTO identify themselves as developing countries. On the other hand, World Bank categorizes countries based on their income. The World Bank has divided the economies into 4 income groups: low, low middle, upper middle, and high income countries. A country's category is reviewed every year on July 1 and is based on per capita gross national income in US dollars. Gross national income is the total amount earned by the people and businesses of a country. Now let us talk about the benefits which a country that self-identifies itself as a developing country gets. There are some agreements of the WTO under which developing countries have been given special powers through the provisions of S&DT. S&DT here means special and differential treatment. Under this treatment, there are more than 100 provisions. For example, developing countries are given a longer time to meet their commitments and implement agreements. Developing countries are encouraged by these S&DT provisions so that they can prepare themselves to compete with developed countries on an equal footing. Countries like India also benefit from special and differential treatment, like allowing large input subsidies and minimum support price. Under this provision, it is the responsibility of all WTO members to protect the trade interests of developing countries. They are also expected to help developing countries in acquiring the ability to perform WTO functions, handle disputes, and implement technical standards. These are all quite significant advantages due to which countries like China want to remain in the category of developing countries. Now, let us move on to the question that why now is China's developing status being questioned? Actually, the World Bank in its latest classification has included India in the list of low middle income countries, while China among the upper middle income countries. According to the World Bank, countries with per capita income between $4,096 and $12,695 fall in the upper middle income category, and China has a per capita income of $10,435. Whereas countries with per capita income of $1,046 to $4,095 are placed in the low middle income category, and in India, per capita income is reported as $1,928. Therefore, many countries including India and Brazil are advocating for moving China to the category of developing countries. The controversy over the status of developing and developed country is not a new phenomenon at all. In February 2020, the United States Trade Representatives moved India from its list of developing countries. Inclusion in this list had allowed India to get a special preference in trade with the US and many other exemptions as well. India was excluded from this list on the basis that it belongs to the G20 countries and its contribution to the world trade is 0.5% or more. Apart from India, Brazil, Indonesia, Hong Kong, South Africa, and Argentina were also excluded from this list by the US. Now, another question is why the WTO does not define developed and developing country status. It is not that WTO has not taken any initiative in this direction, but the problem is that whenever it makes any effort in this direction, developing countries get united and start opposing it. The reason behind this is that there is a very wide disparity in income of the existing member states. Therefore, it is difficult to set any standard criteria for such categorization. In such a scenario, it has been left to the member states to change their own categories as and when they see fit. Now you will think that it is up to the discretion of member countries to choose a category, then why countries like America and Australia do not declare themselves as developing nations? Actually, if these countries want, they can do so. But it would be a strange thing to do. If countries like America also start declaring themselves as developing countries, then this system will have no meaning. In February 2019, the US introduced a resolution under which a clear framework was to be set for developing and developed countries, but this proposal has not been adopted yet. However, some countries have gone ahead and given up the tag of developing country and are ready to meet the organization's commitments. For example, in October 2019, South Korea gave up its concessions as a developing country. The US has also convinced Brazil to give up its status as a developing country. It all points towards the fact that this whole exercise is still not standardized and depends upon voluntary declarations by the member countries. To establish a justice and rules-based international order, it is imperative that global institutions like WTO set some clear standards and definitions so that only those countries which deserve support get access to it. Now let us have a look at practice questions based on the 3 stories of today's bulletin. 1. In context of Sri Lanka's financial crisis, explain the importance of foreign exchange reserves for a country. 2. The battle for supremacy in the Indo-Pacific region is not only geopolitical but also geo-economic. Comment. 3. How is the developed or developing status of any country determined? Throw light on the controversy on the developing status of China. That is all for this week's Around the World in 7 days. I will be back next week with new stories behind the events which continue to shape the world around us. Stay tuned.